Here is something that the laws of physics permit, but that your intuition will refuse to accept. The future can cause the past, not metaphorically, not in a science fiction sense, in the precise, mathematical, experimentally confirmed sense that events which have not yet occurred can influence events that have already happened. The arrow of time that you experience the feeling that the past is fixed, the future is open, and causation flows in one direction only is not a feature of the fundamental laws of physics. It is a feature of your perception. The laws themselves do not care which direction time flows. They work equally well in both directions, and the experiments that confirm this are not speculative thought experiments on a blackboard. They are real measurements, performed in real laboratories, producing real data that shows, unambiguously, that the future reaches backward and shapes the past. This is called retrocausality, and it is one of the most carefully guarded secrets in modern physics. Not because physicists are hiding it, but because its implications are so unsettling, so fundamentally disorienting, so destructive to the ordinary human understanding of time, causation, and free will, that most physicists who encounter the evidence prefer to file it under interesting but probably not real and move on. The minority who take it seriously have produced some of the most profound insights in the history of the discipline, and the contemplative traditions, as we will discover, have been describing retrocausality for millennia in languages that physics is only now learning to translate. Let us begin with the experiment that started everything. In 1978, John Archibald Wheeler, the physicist whose work has been the backbone of this entire series, proposed a thought experiment that extended the double-slit experiment to its most radical conclusion. The standard double-slit experiment, which we examined in our investigation of the evil eye, demonstrates that a particle behaves as a wave when it is not observed, and as a particle when it is observed. The act of observation determines whether the particle goes through one slit or both. Wheeler asked, what if the decision to observe is made after the particle has already passed through the slits? Think about what this means. The particle approaches the slits. It must decide whether to go through one slit or both. In the standard experiment, this decision depends on whether a detector is present at the slits. But in Wheeler's delayed choice version, there is no detector at the slits. The particle passes through the apparatus unobserved. And then, after the particle has already committed to its path, after it has already gone through one slit or both, the experimenter chooses whether to insert a detector that determines which path the particle took. If the experimenter chooses to detect the path, the particle behaves as if it went through one slit, no interference pattern. If the experimenter chooses not to detect the path, the particle behaves as if it went through both slits, interference pattern. The decision made after the particle has passed through the slits determines what the particle did at the slits. The present choice changes the past behavior. Wheeler proposed this as a thought experiment. It took several years for technology to catch up. But in 1984, Carroll Alley and his team at the University of Maryland performed the first delayed choice experiment, and the result was exactly what Wheeler predicted. The delayed choice changed the particle's past behavior. In 2007, a team led by Vincent Jacques in Paris performed an even more rigorous version using single photons and fast-switching detectors, confirming the result with no loopholes. And in 2012, a team in Vienna performed a delayed choice quantum eraser experiment that made the retrocausal implications even more stark. Not only could the present choice determine the past behavior, but the erasure of information in the present could restore a past behavior that the acquisition of that same information had previously destroyed. Let us be precise about what these experiments demonstrate. They do not demonstrate that you can send a message backward in time. They do not demonstrate that the future determines the past in a way that would create paradoxes or violate causality in the classical sense. What they demonstrate is something more subtle and, in many ways, more profound. The past does not have a definite character until the future determines it. The particle's history is not fixed at the moment the particle passes through the slits. It remains indeterminate in a quantum superposition of having gone through one slit and having gone through both until a future measurement retroactively selects one history or the other. The past is not a fait accompli. It is a superposition of possibilities that is continuously being shaped by present and future observations. Wheeler understood the cosmic implications of this result. He proposed what he called the delayed choice cosmic version, a thought experiment in which the photons are not generated in a laboratory but come from a distant quasar, billions of light years away. The photons were emitted billions of years ago, long before the Earth existed, long before any human being was alive to observe them. They travel across the universe, and their path is bent by a massive galaxy that acts as a gravitational lens, splitting each photon's path into two routes around the galaxy, just like the two slits in the double slit experiment. The photon arrives at Earth, and the astronomer chooses whether to detect which path it took or to allow the paths to interfere. And the choice made by the astronomer today, right now, in the present, determines whether the photon traveled one path or both paths around the galaxy. The photon's behavior billions of years ago is retroactively determined by a choice made in the present. The astronomer's measurement does not reveal a pre-existing fact about the photon's past. It creates that fact. The past of the photon did not exist as a definite history until the present observation brought it into being. In 2017, a team of physicists actually performed this cosmic delayed choice experiment using photons from a quasar located 8 billion light-years away, with the gravitational lensing provided by a galaxy between the quasar and Earth. The result confirmed Wheeler's prediction. The measurement choice made on Earth in 2017 retroactively determined the behavior of photons that had been traveling through space for 8 billion years. The present shaped the past across a span of time that is more than half the age of the universe. This result should stop you in your tracks. An astronomer in a laboratory on Earth, in the year 2017, performed an action that determined the behavior of a photon 8 billion years ago. A photon that was emitted when the Earth did not exist, when the solar system had not yet formed, when the Milky Way was a fraction of its current size. The astronomer's choice reached backward across more than half the history of the universe and retroactively determined how a particle of light behaved in the ancient cosmos. The present shaped the past, not in a theoretical framework, not in a mathematical model, in a real experiment with real photons, published in a peer-reviewed journal and confirmed by independent analysis. If this does not disturb you, you have not understood it, because it means that the past, the thing you assume is settled, finished, done, is not entirely settled. It is not entirely finished. It is not entirely done. At the quantum level, the past remains open to influence from the present and the future. The history of the universe is not a completed manuscript stored in a cosmic library. It is a living document that is still being edited by the observations that conscious beings make right now. This is not interpretation. This is data. Now, the standard response from most physicists is that the delayed choice experiment does not violate causality because no usable information is transmitted backward in time. You cannot use it to send a message to the past. You cannot use it to change an event that has already been recorded. The retrocausal influence operates only on the quantum level, only on systems that have not yet been measured, and only in a way that is consistent with the overall forward-flowing causal structure of the macroscopic world. The past changes, but only the unmeasured past, the part that was never definite in the first place. This is a valid response, and it is important for maintaining the logical consistency of physics. But notice what it concedes. The unmeasured past is not fixed. The unmeasured past is a superposition of possibilities that can be retroactively shaped by present observations. And since the vast majority of the past is unmeasured, since the vast majority of events that have ever occurred were not observed by any conscious being at the time they occurred, the past is, in a very real sense, still open. Not completely open. The measured past is fixed. The recorded past is definite. But the enormous ocean of unrecorded, unobserved, unmeasured events that constitutes the bulk of cosmic history is still in superposition, still being shaped, still being determined by the observations that conscious beings make in the present and will make in the future. This is Wheeler's participatory universe, which we encountered in our investigation of the first observer. But now we see it from a different angle. In the first observer investigation, we asked, who collapsed the superposition at the Big Bang? Wheeler's answer was that present observers reach backward and participate in creating the past. Now we see that this is not a philosophical speculation. It is the direct implication of experimental results. The delayed choice experiment is the participatory universe in miniature, a laboratory demonstration of the principle that the present observation creates the past history. The physicist Richard Feynman, Wheeler's former student and one of the most brilliant minds in the history of physics, contributed a framework that makes retrocausality even more natural. In Feynman's path integral formulation of quantum mechanics, a particle does not travel along a single path from point A to point B. It travels along every possible path simultaneously. The probability of arriving at point B is calculated by summing the contributions of all possible paths, including paths that go backward in time, paths that zigzag through space, paths that loop around the universe and back. Every path contributes, and the paths that go backward in time are not mathematical fictions. They are necessary for the calculation to produce correct results. The path integral formulation has a feature that is often glossed over in popular accounts, but that is essential for our investigation. When you sum over all possible paths, you must include paths that violate the ordinary rules of causation paths in which the particle arrives at point B before it leaves point A, paths in which effects precede their causes, paths in which time runs backward. If you exclude these paths from the sum, you get the wrong answer. If you include them, you get the right answer, the answer that matches experiment with a precision of 12 decimal places. The backward in time paths are not optional. They are not metaphorical. They are necessary ingredients in the most accurate physical theory ever constructed. This means that retrocausality is not an exotic add-on to quantum mechanics. It is built into the foundations. The backward travelling paths are there in every calculation, contributing to every prediction, producing every experimental result. They are as fundamental to quantum mechanics as the forward travelling paths. The only reason we do not notice them in daily life is that their contributions are averaged out in the macroscopic world of classical physics, just as the wave-like behaviour of particles is averaged out in the macroscopic world, producing the illusion of solid, definite, classical objects. But at the quantum level, where the fundamental processes that constitute reality actually occur, the backward in time paths are as real and as active as the forward in time paths. Feynman took this further in his interpretation of antiparticles. An antiparticle, a positron for example, which is the antiparticle of the electron, can be understood as a normal particle travelling backward in time. When an electron-positron pair is created from a photon, what is actually happening, in Feynman's picture, is that an electron is travelling forward in time and then, at the point of pair creation, it reverses direction and travels backward in time, appearing to us as a positron. The antiparticle is not a new entity. It is the same particle, seen from a different temporal perspective. The future version of the particle has turned around and is heading back toward the past. This interpretation is not merely a clever visualization. It produces correct predictions for every experiment in quantum electrodynamics, the most precisely tested theory in the history of science. The backwards in time paths are not optional decorations. They are essential components of the mathematical framework that describes reality at its most fundamental level. The laws of physics do not merely permit travel backward in time. They require it, at the quantum level, for their own consistency. The theoretical physicist John Cramer, at the University of Washington, developed this into a comprehensive interpretation of quantum mechanics called the transactional interpretation. In Cramer's framework, every quantum event involves two waves: an offer wave that travels forward in time from the source, and a confirmation wave that travels backward in time from the absorber. The quantum transaction is not complete until both waves meet, until the future has confirmed the offer made by the past. The handshake between the forward-traveling and backward-traveling waves is what produces the definite outcome that we observe. Reality, in Cramer's picture, is not created by the past pushing forward. It is created by a negotiation between the past and the future, with both temporal directions contributing equally to the final result. Cramer's transactional interpretation is not mainstream, but it is taken seriously by a significant number of physicists, and it has the advantage of providing a natural explanation for several features of quantum mechanics that other interpretations struggle with, including the delayed choice experiment, the EPR correlations, and the quantum eraser. In each case, the retrocausal confirmation wave provides the mechanism by which the future influences the past. The Israeli physicist Yakir Aharonov has developed perhaps the most rigorous mathematical framework for retrocausality in quantum mechanics. His two-state vector formalism, developed with colleagues Lev Vaidman and others, describes quantum systems as being determined by two quantum states simultaneously, one propagating forward from the past and one propagating backward from the future. The present state of a quantum system is not determined solely by its past history. It is determined by the combination of its past boundary condition and its future boundary condition. The system is, in Aharonov's language, pre-selected by the past and post-selected by the future, and the complete description of its present state requires both selections. Aharonov's formalism has produced remarkable predictions. The most famous is the concept of weak values, the values that quantum properties take between pre-selection and post-selection, between the past boundary and the future boundary. Weak values can be far larger or far smaller than any ordinary measurement would produce. They can even be negative or complex valued values that make no sense in classical physics, but that are experimentally measurable using a technique called weak measurement. These anomalous weak values have been confirmed in dozens of experiments since the 1990s, providing direct empirical evidence that quantum systems are influenced by their future boundary conditions. The experimental confirmation of weak values has been one of the most active areas of quantum optics in the past 2 decades. In 2011, a team at the University of Toronto used weak measurements to directly observe the trajectories of photons in a double-slit experiment, something that the standard quantum formalism said was impossible without destroying the interference pattern. But weak measurement, guided by the two-state vector formalism with its backward propagating influence, allowed the trajectories to be observed without disturbing the interference. The photons were simultaneously particles and waves, simultaneously going through one slit and both slits, and the weak measurement revealed this without forcing a collapse. The future boundary condition, the post-selection, was the key that made the observation possible. In 2013, Aharonov's team demonstrated another remarkable prediction of the two-state vector formalism, that a quantum particle can be in 2 places at the same time, with each location carrying a full particle's worth of effect. This quantum Cheshire cat effect, named after Lewis Carroll's cat, whose grin persists after the cat has disappeared, was confirmed experimentally using neutrons at the Institut Laue-Langevin in France. The neutron's mass was measured in one location, while its magnetic moment was measured in a different location. The properties of a single particle were separated in space, a result that makes sense only if the particle is influenced by both its past and its future boundary conditions simultaneously. In 2017, Aharonov and his colleagues published a paper arguing that the two-state vector formalism resolves several long-standing paradoxes in quantum mechanics, including the measurement problem and the EPR paradox, by treating the influence of the future as a physical reality rather than a mathematical artifact. If the future genuinely influences the present, then the apparent randomness of quantum measurement is not really random. It is determined by future boundary conditions that are not accessible to the present observer. The quantum uncertainty that we observe in the present is not genuine indeterminacy. It is the result of our ignorance of the future. If we could see the future boundary conditions, we could predict every quantum outcome with certainty. This is a staggering claim. It implies that the future already exists, that it is as real and as definite as the past, and that its influence on the present is as physical and as measurable as the influence of the past. The block universe of general relativity, which we examined in our investigation of time, tells us the same thing from a different direction. Past, present, and future coexist in a four-dimensional space-time block, and the distinction between them is, as Einstein said, a stubbornly persistent illusion. Aharonov's two-state vector formalism adds the mechanism. The future is not merely coexistent with the present. It is causally active in the present, shaping quantum outcomes through backward propagating influences that are as real as the forward propagating influences of the past. The CPT theorem, one of the deepest results in theoretical physics, provides the foundational support for all of this. The CPT theorem states that every physical process remains valid if you simultaneously reverse the direction of time, swap particles for antiparticles, and mirror the spatial coordinates. This means that the fundamental laws of physics do not distinguish between forward and backward in time. Every equation that works in one temporal direction works equally well in the other. The arrow of time that you experience, the feeling that causes precede effects, that the past is fixed and the future is open, is not built into the laws of physics. It is an emergent property of thermodynamics, of entropy, of the statistical behavior of large numbers of particles. At the level of individual quantum events, time has no preferred direction. The future can cause the past as naturally and as lawfully as the past can cause the future. The philosopher of physics, Hugh Price, at the University of Cambridge, has argued forcefully that the prejudice against retrocausality is just that, a prejudice. It has no basis in the fundamental laws of physics. Price calls it the double standard. Physicists readily accept that the past influences the present. This is just ordinary causation, but they refuse to accept that the future influences the present. Even though the laws of physics are time-symmetric and provide no justification for treating one direction differently from the other, the double standard is not physics. It is psychology, the projection of our subjective experience of temporal flow onto the fundamental laws, which know nothing of that experience. Price and the physicist Ken Wharton at San Jose State University have developed a retrocausal framework for quantum mechanics that takes the time symmetry of the fundamental laws seriously. In their framework, the correlations that Einstein called spooky action at a distance, the instantaneous correlations between entangled particles separated by large distances, are explained not by faster-than-light signals, but by retrocausal influences that propagate backward in time from the measurement to the common source. The entangled particles are not communicating across space. They are connected through time through the backward propagating influence of the future measurement on the past preparation. Entanglement, in this framework, is not spooky action at a distance. It is perfectly ordinary action at a temporal distance, the future influencing the past through the time-symmetric laws of quantum mechanics. This reinterpretation of entanglement has profound implications. It means that the non-local correlations we explored in our investigation of identical twins, the synchronized experiences, the shared pain, the parallel lives may be mediated not by instantaneous signals across space, but by retrocausal influences through time. The twins are connected not because their consciousnesses are communicating in the present, but because their shared origin in the past and their shared future in the quantum landscape create a temporal bridge that links their experiences across any spatial distance. The connection is through time, not through space, and time, as we have established, flows in both directions. And here is where the contemplative traditions become not just relevant but essential, because the idea that the future shapes the present, that your destiny is not merely the consequence of your past actions, but an active force that pulls you toward it from ahead, is one of the oldest and most persistent themes in human spiritual thought. In Christianity, the concept of providence, divine foresight, and guidance describes a God who does not merely react to events as they unfold, but who sees the entire timeline simultaneously and guides creation toward its intended end. The Book of Revelation describes Christ as the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. This is not a statement about chronological priority. It is a statement about temporal omnipresence. The divine exists at every point in time, simultaneously, and the end of the story is as present to God as the beginning. The guidance that creation receives is not only from the past, from the initial act of creation, but from the future, from the omega point toward which all of creation is being drawn. The theologian Pierre Teilhard de Chardin developed this into his concept of the omega point, the future state of maximum consciousness and maximum unity toward which the universe is evolving. For Teilhard, evolution is not a blind, purposeless, backward-looking process driven only by random mutation and natural selection. It is a teleological process, a process that is drawn toward its future fulfillment by the omega point that lies ahead. The future does not merely receive what the past creates. The future pulls, it attracts, it guides. The omega point is the ultimate attractor, the future state that shapes the present by drawing it forward, the way a destination shapes a journey even before the traveller arrives. Boethius, the 6th century philosopher whose concept of nunc stans we encountered in our investigation of time, provided the philosophical framework for understanding how divine foreknowledge and human free will can coexist. God, Boethius argued, does not foresee the future the way you foresee tomorrow's weather by predicting it from present conditions. God sees the future because God sees all of time simultaneously, from a vantage point outside of time. God's knowledge of the future does not cause the future, any more than your knowledge of the present causes the present. But it does mean that the future is definite, that it exists as a completed reality, known to God in its entirety, and that its influence on the present is as real as the influence of the past. In Islam, the concept of qadar, divine decree, describes a reality in which everything that will happen has already been determined. The Prophet Muhammad stated that God wrote the destinies of all creation 50,000 years before he created the heavens and the earth. This is usually understood as a statement about predestination. But in the context of the block universe and the two-state vector formalism, it acquires a different and more subtle meaning. The future is as real as the past. It already exists, and its existence is not a negation of free will but a description of the temporal structure of reality. You make choices freely in the present, but the present in which you make those choices is shaped by both the past and the future, by both the boundary conditions that lie behind you and the boundary conditions that lie ahead. The Sufi tradition deepens this understanding with extraordinary subtlety. Ibn Arabi describes time as a circle rather than a line, a circle in which the beginning and the end are the same point, and in which every point on the circle is simultaneously cause and effect, origin and destination, alpha and omega. The divine knowledge encompasses the entire circle simultaneously, and the human experience of moving through time is the experience of traversing a circle that is, from the divine perspective, a single, complete, simultaneously existing whole. Your destiny is not ahead of you on a timeline. It is beside you on a circle, always present, always accessible, always influencing the point you currently occupy through the curvature of the temporal circle that connects every moment to every other moment. The Sufi practice of tawakkul, radical trust in the divine plan, is, in this framework, not passive resignation to a predetermined future. It is the recognition that the future already exists, that it is already influencing the present, and that the most rational response to this recognition is not anxiety about what will happen, but trust in the temporal structure of a reality that is, at its deepest level, a completed whole. Tawakkul is the experiential correlate of the block universe, the lived response to the recognition that all of time exists simultaneously, and that the divine awareness that encompasses it all is trustworthy. In Hinduism, the concept of destiny, prarabdha karma, describes the portion of accumulated karma that is ripe for expression in the current lifetime. This karma is not merely the consequence of past actions. It is the future that those actions have already created, a future that exists, in a block universe sense, as a definite reality that the present self is moving toward. The Bhagavad Gita describes this with extraordinary directness, when Krishna reveals to Arjuna that the warriors on the battlefield are already slain, that their deaths have already occurred in the divine perspective, even though they have not yet occurred in the human perspective. The future is settled. What remains is for the present to enact what the future already contains. In Buddhism, the concept of time is more radical than in any other tradition. The Madhyamaka philosopher Nagarjuna argued that time itself is empty of inherent existence, that past, present, and future do not exist as independent, self-sustaining realities, but arise only in dependence on each other. The present cannot exist without the past and the future, because the present is defined by its relationship to them. The past cannot exist without the present, because the past is what the present has moved beyond, and the future cannot exist without the present, because the future is what the present is moving toward. Each depends on the others. None exists independently, and this mutual dependence means that the causal influence between them is not one-directional. If the present depends on the future for its definition, then the future is already operative in the present, already shaping it, already influencing it, already present within it. The concept of dependent origination operates not only from past to present, but, in some interpretations, from present to past and from future to present. The Avatamsaka Sutra describes a universe in which every moment contains every other moment, in which the past, present, and future interpenetrate so completely that the distinction between them dissolves. Indra's net, the infinite web of jewels in which each jewel reflects every other jewel, is a spatial metaphor for a temporal reality. Every moment reflects every other moment. The present contains the future. The future contains the past. And the consciousness that perceives this interpenetration perceives time not as a river flowing in one direction, but as an ocean in which every point is connected to every other point. In the next stage of this investigation, we will examine the scientific evidence that the future may already be influencing the present in measurable ways, the presentiment experiments, the retroactive influence studies, and the attractor dynamics of complex systems. Because if the future is as real as the past, and if its influence on the present is as physical as the experiments suggest, then the question of who you are becoming is not merely a question about your choices in the present. It is a question about the future that is already pulling you toward it. The future that, in a very real sense, already knows who you are. The future is not empty. It is not a blank page waiting to be written. It is a completed text that you have not yet read. And the strange, persistent, scientifically documented feeling that something is guiding you, that your life has a direction, a purpose, a destination that you can sense but not yet see, may be the subjective experience of the future's backward-reaching influence on the present. Your future self may already exist, and they may already be guiding you home. We have established that the fundamental laws of physics are time-symmetric, that they work equally well forward and backward, that retrocausality is built into the mathematical structure of quantum mechanics, and that experiments have confirmed, with increasing precision, that present observations can retroactively determine the past behavior of quantum systems across billions of years. The physics permits retrocausality. The experiments confirm it at the quantum level. The question that remains is whether retrocausality operates at the level of human experience, whether the future reaches backward and influences not just photons and electrons but brains, bodies, and conscious minds. The answer, according to a growing body of experimental evidence, is yes. And the evidence comes from a source that mainstream science has been reluctant to take seriously, but that has refused, despite decades of skepticism, to disappear. In 1997, the psychologist Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences published the first rigorous study of what he called presentiment, the physiological response to a future event before the event occurs. The experimental design was simple and elegant. A subject sits in front of a computer screen. The computer randomly selects an image from a large database and displays it. Some images are emotionally arousing, violent scenes, erotic images, disturbing photographs. Others are calm landscapes, neutral objects, mundane scenes. The subject's physiological responses, skin conductance, heart rate, pupil dilation, are monitored continuously. The expected result, according to conventional physiology, is straightforward. The subject should show an emotional response after the arousing image is displayed, and no response before. The physiological arousal should follow the stimulus, not precede it. Cause, then effect. Stimulus, then response. Past, then present. That is not what Radin found. In study after study, across multiple physiological measures and multiple subject populations, Radin documented a consistent, statistically significant physiological response that preceded the display of the arousing image by approximately 2 to 5 seconds. Before the computer had selected the image, before the image existed on the screen, before any photon from the image had reached the subject's retina, the subject's body was already responding. Skin conductance rose, heart rate changed, pupil dilation shifted. The body was reacting to an event that had not yet occurred. Radin's initial study has been followed by over 2 decades of experimental refinement. He developed increasingly sophisticated protocols to rule out artifacts. In some experiments, the random number generator that selected the images was a hardware-based quantum random number generator, ensuring that the selection was genuinely random and not determined by any algorithmic pattern that the subject's brain could unconsciously detect. In other experiments, the images were not selected until after the pre-stimulus physiological window had been recorded, ensuring that no information about the upcoming image existed anywhere in the physical universe, not in the computer, not in the experimenter's mind, not in any physical system until after the subject's body had already begun responding to it. The results held. The body responded to a future event that had not yet been determined by any physical process. The only explanation consistent with the data is that information from the future was reaching backward in time and influencing the subject's physiology in the present. The Dutch psychologist Dick Bierman at the University of Amsterdam replicated Radin's findings using fMRI, showing that the brain's emotional processing regions, including the amygdala and the visual cortex, showed differential activation before arousing images compared to calm images, even before the images had been selected. The brain was not merely aroused in general, it was preparing itself for the specific emotional content that was about to appear. The future was casting a shadow into the present, and that shadow was visible in the neural activity of the brain. The effect was small but reliable. It appeared consistently across experiments. It was specific to arousing images. The pre-stimulus response was significantly larger before emotional images than before calm images, even though the selection was random and neither the subject nor the experimenter could know in advance which type of image would appear. The body was not merely aroused in general, it was aroused specifically in anticipation of the emotional content that was about to be randomly selected and displayed. Radin published these results in peer-reviewed journals and invited replication. The replications came. By 2012, a meta-analysis by Julia Mossbridge, Patrizio Tresoldi, and Jessica Utz, published in Frontiers in Psychology, a mainstream peer-reviewed journal, pooled data from 26 studies conducted by multiple independent laboratories and found a statistically significant overall effect. The probability that the pooled result was due to chance was less than 1 in a billion. The meta-analysis also ruled out several potential artifacts, including expectation effects, sensory leakage, and methodological flaws in the individual studies. The meta-analysis generated significant debate. Critics, including the psychologist James Alcock, argued that publication bias, the tendency for positive results to be published while negative results remain in file drawers, could inflate the apparent effect size. Mossbridge and colleagues addressed this by calculating the number of unpublished null studies that would be needed to reduce the pooled effect to non-significance. The answer was approximately 87 unpublished null studies for every published study, a ratio so extreme that publication bias alone cannot plausibly account for the effect. Other critics pointed to potential sensory cues, experimenter effects, and analytical flexibility. Each criticism was addressed in subsequent studies with tighter controls, and the effect persisted. The physicist Edwin May proposed an alternative explanation called decision augmentation theory, which suggests that subjects unconsciously use precognitive information to influence the timing of their responses, rather than genuinely responding to a future event. But this explanation still requires precognition. It merely shifts the mechanism from physiology to behavior. The retrocausal influence remains. The debate is not about whether the future influences the present. It is about how the influence operates. In 2014, Mossbridge and colleagues published a follow-up paper in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, reporting that the presentiment effect could be detected not only in peripheral physiology, but in brain activity. Using fMRI and EEG, they showed that the brain exhibited predictive activation patterns before the random selection of emotional stimuli patterns that were consistent with the brain preparing itself for the specific type of stimulus that was about to appear. The future event was casting a shadow backward in time, and the shadow was visible in the neural activity of the subject's brain seconds before the event occurred. Now add the work of Daryl Bem, which we encountered in our investigation of dreams. Bem's Feeling the Future paper, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2011, reported 9 experiments involving over 1,000 subjects that appeared to demonstrate retroactive influence of future events on present behavior. In the most striking experiment, subjects performed a memory test and then, after the test, practiced a randomly selected subset of the words. The subjects recalled the words they would later practice better than the words they would not, as if the future practice session reached backward and enhanced the present memory performance. Bem's paper was published after passing the same rigorous peer review that every other paper in the journal undergoes. The subsequent replication record was mixed. Some laboratories replicated the effects, others did not. But the 2015 meta-analysis by Bem, Tresoldi, and Utz, pooling data from 90 experiments conducted by 33 laboratories in 14 countries, found a small but statistically significant overall effect, with a probability due to chance of less than 1 in a billion. The combined weight of the presentiment and retroactive influence evidence constitutes one of the most challenging anomalies in contemporary science. The effects are not large enough to be practically useful. You cannot use presentiment to predict the stock market or avoid accidents, but they are large enough to be statistically undeniable when sufficient data is pooled. And they are precisely the kind of effects that the two-state vector formalism and the retrocausal interpretation of quantum mechanics would predict. Small, subtle, operating at the boundary between quantum indeterminacy and classical definiteness, and most readily detectable in the physiological systems that are most sensitive to quantum-level processes, the neural and autonomic systems that operate at the interface between the quantum and the classical. The neuroscientist Benjamin Libet, whose work on the timing of conscious decision-making we encountered in our investigation of time, produced findings that are relevant here. Libet showed that the brain's readiness potential, the neural preparation for a voluntary action, begins approximately 500 milliseconds before the subject becomes consciously aware of the decision to act. The brain decides before the conscious mind knows it has decided. This finding is usually interpreted as evidence against free will, as proof that unconscious brain processes determine our actions before we become aware of them. But in the retrocausal framework, it can be interpreted differently. The brain's readiness potential is not merely responding to unconscious processes in the past. It may also be responding to the future outcome of the action, the post-selection, in Aharonov's language, that reaches backward and shapes the neural preparation in the present. The brain does not merely prepare for the future, it is influenced by the future. The pattern across the presentiment and retroactive influence literatures is consistent with what we would expect if the two-state vector formalism is correct, if human experience is shaped by both past and future boundary conditions. The effects are small, because the retrocausal influence of the future is subtle, operating at the quantum level and filtered through the noisy, thermally complex machinery of the brain. The effects are inconsistent across individual replications, because the conditions that permit retrocausal influence, reduced decoherence, enhanced quantum coherence, specific states of attention and arousal are not consistently present in every experimental session. But the effects are real, because they emerge consistently in large-scale meta-analyses that pool data across many sessions and many subjects, averaging out the noise and revealing the signal beneath. The concept of the attractor provides a complementary framework for understanding how the future can influence the present without violating the logical structure of causation. In the mathematical theory of dynamical systems, an attractor is a state toward which a system evolves over time, regardless of where it starts. Drop a marble into a bowl, and it will roll to the bottom. The bottom of the bowl is the attractor. The marble's future state resting at the bottom determines its present behavior rolling downhill. The future does not cause the present in the strict sense, but the future state constrains the present behavior, guides it, shapes it, pulls it in a specific direction. The attractor is the destination that organizes the journey, even before the journey is complete. Attractors are not mystical concepts. They are precise mathematical objects, studied rigorously in the theory of nonlinear dynamics. Every physical system with a stable endpoint has an attractor, A pendulum's attractor is its resting position. A river's attractor is the sea. A star's attractor is its equilibrium state, where the outward pressure of nuclear fusion balances the inward pull of gravity. In each case, the present behavior of the system is organized by a future state, the state toward which the system is evolving. The attractor does not cause the present behavior in the strict sense of efficient causation, but it constrains it, guides it, shapes it. It is what Aristotle called a final cause, the purpose or end toward which a process is directed. Modern physics banished final causes 4 centuries ago. Attractor dynamics may be bringing them back. Simple attractors produce simple behavior, the marble rolling to the bottom of the bowl. But complex systems can have strange attractors, patterns of behavior that are deterministic but unpredictable, structured but non-repeating, ordered but infinitely complex. The weather has a strange attractor. The stock market has a strange attractor. The human heart has a strange attractor. And consciousness, some researchers have argued, may have a strange attractor too, a future state that organizes and guides the trajectory of conscious experience without determining it precisely, creating a balance between order and freedom, between destiny and choice, between the pull of the future and the push of the past. The mathematician Ralph Abraham and the biologist Rupert Sheldrake have proposed that biological systems are guided by what they call morphic attractors, future states that exert a formative influence on present development. In their framework, the development of an organism is not driven solely by the genetic code pushing from the past. It is also pulled by the attractor, the future form toward which the organism is developing. The acorn does not merely execute a genetic program that happens to produce an oak tree. The acorn is drawn toward the oak, pulled by the attractor of the mature form, guided by the future toward which it is growing. This idea has been controversial, but it has echoes in mainstream biology. The concept of equifinality, the observation that developing organisms can reach the same final form through very different developmental pathways, even when perturbed by injury or environmental disruption, suggests that the endpoint exerts a formative influence on the process. If you remove half the cells from an early embryo, the remaining cells will reorganize and produce a complete, normally formed organism. The embryo does not merely execute a fixed developmental program, it navigates toward a target, an attractor, and adjusts its trajectory to reach that target, even when the original path is disrupted. The concept of equifinality in biological development raises a deeper question that science has been reluctant to ask. Is there teleology, purpose, directionality, goal-directedness in nature? Since the scientific revolution, the dominant view has been that teleological explanations are illegitimate, that science should explain events only in terms of their past causes, never in terms of their future purposes. The ball does not roll downhill because it wants to reach the bottom. It rolls because gravity pushes it. The heart does not beat in order to circulate blood. It beats because electrical impulses stimulate cardiac muscle contraction. Purpose is out, mechanism is in. But the retrocausal framework challenges this exclusion. If the future genuinely influences the present, if the post-selection is as physically real as the pre-selection, then teleological explanations are not illegitimate. They are physically grounded. The ball does roll toward the bottom, and the bottom is a future state that constrains the ball's present behavior. The heart does beat in order to circulate blood, if the future state of blood circulation is a boundary condition that retroactively shapes the present cardiac activity. Teleology is not an alternative to mechanism. It is mechanism operating in the temporal direction that the prejudice of forward-only causation has excluded. The philosopher Thomas Nagel, whose work we encountered in our investigation of the first observer, he has argued in his book Mind and Cosmos that the emergence of consciousness in the universe is best explained by teleological natural laws, laws that guide the development of the cosmos toward the production of mind. Nagel is not a theist. He does not invoke God or intelligent design. He simply argues that the emergence of consciousness from unconscious matter is so improbable and so remarkable that it is better explained by a universe that is oriented toward consciousness than by a universe that produces it. Accidentally, the attractor framework gives Nagel's intuition a mathematical formulation. Consciousness is the strange attractor of the universe, and the trajectory of cosmic evolution is organized by this attractor, pulling from the future. The physicist Lee Smolin has proposed a related idea in the context of cosmology. Smolin's cosmological natural selection hypothesis suggests that the universe has been shaped by a selection process that operates across multiple generations of universes, with black holes serving as the reproductive events. The constants of physics in our universe are not random. They are the product of a selection process that has optimized them for the production of complexity, life, and consciousness. The future of the universe, its maximum complexity, its maximum consciousness, is the attractor that has shaped the physical constants from the beginning. The universe is not merely evolving toward complexity. It was designed for complexity from the start, designed by the future, pulling from ahead. Teilhard de Chardin, whom we encountered in the previous stage, formalized this intuition in his concept of the omega point. Teilhard observed that the history of the universe displays a consistent trajectory toward increasing complexity and increasing consciousness. Matter organizes into atoms. Atoms organize into molecules. Molecules organize into cells. Cells organize into organisms. Organisms organize into societies. Societies organize into global networks. And consciousness deepens at every stage, from the rudimentary responsiveness of a bacterium to the self-reflective awareness of a human being, to the global interconnection of the noosphere. This trajectory, Teilhard argued, is not random. It is guided by an attractor, the omega point, the future state of maximum consciousness and maximum unity toward which all of creation is being drawn. The trajectory that Teilhard describes is empirically observable. The history of the universe does move from simplicity to complexity, from unconscious matter to conscious beings, from isolated organisms to interconnected civilizations. This is not a philosophical assertion. It is a factual observation about the direction of cosmic evolution. The question is whether this direction is accidental, a random walk that happens to have moved toward complexity, or whether it is guided by an attractor that was present from the beginning. Teilhard argued for the latter, and the retrocausal framework provides the mechanism. The future state of maximum complexity reaches backward through time and shapes the trajectory of cosmic evolution in the present, just as the post-selection in Aharonov's formalism reaches backward and shapes the quantum state in the present. Teilhard's framework is explicitly Christian. He identified the omega point with the cosmic Christ, the Logos through which all things were made and toward which all things are being drawn. But the structure of his argument is compatible with the physics of retrocausality. If the future already exists as the block universe, and the two-state vector formalism suggest, and if the future influences the present, as the delayed choice experiments and the presentiment studies suggest, then the increasing complexity of the universe is not merely the result of the past pushing forward. It is also the result of the future pulling backward. The omega point is not just a theological concept. It is a physical attractor, a future boundary condition that shapes the present trajectory of the cosmos through the retrocausal mechanism that quantum mechanics describes. The 20th century theologian Wolfhart Pannenberg developed this connection between physics and theology with particular rigor. Pannenberg argued that the future is the mode of God's being, that God is not a being who exists in the past or the present, but a being whose primary mode of reality is the future. God does not push creation forward from behind. God pulls creation forward from ahead. The power that moves the universe is not the force of the Big Bang, fading into the past. It is the attraction of the omega point, intensifying into the future. Creation is not driven, it is drawn. Pannenberg's theology is remarkably compatible with the two-state vector formalism. If every quantum system is determined by both its past and its future boundary conditions, and if the universe as a whole is a quantum system, then the universe is determined by both its past boundary condition, the Big Bang, and its future boundary condition, whatever lies at the end of time. The past pushes, the future pulls, and the present is the meeting point, the place where the forward propagating influence of the past and the backward propagating influence of the future combine to produce the reality you experience right now. The implications for human life are immediate and personal. If the future influences the present, and if your future state is an attractor that shapes your present trajectory, then the feeling of purpose, the sense that your life is moving towards something, that there is a destination you are meant to reach, that certain paths feel right and others feel wrong, is not an illusion generated by the brain's narrative machinery. It is a perception. You are perceiving, dimly and imperfectly but genuinely, the backward-reaching influence of your own future on your present experience. The destination is real. The pull is physical. And the sense of purpose that guides you is as legitimate a form of perception as the sense of sight that shows you the world in front of you. This does not mean that the future is fixed and that you have no choice. The two-state vector formalism does not eliminate free will. It transforms free will from a single-direction process choosing among future possibilities based on past experience into a bidirectional process, choosing in the present based on both the push of the past and the pull of the future. Your choices matter, but they matter in a richer way than you thought, because they are shaped not only by where you have been, but by where you are going. In Buddhism, the concept of the Bodhisattva's vow provides a framework for understanding how the future can influence the present through conscious intention. The Bodhisattva vows to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. This vow is not merely a present intention directed at a future goal. In the Buddhist understanding, the vow creates a karmic force that begins operating immediately, shaping the Bodhisattva's present experience, guiding their actions, and altering the trajectory of their consciousness from the moment the vow is taken. The future enlightenment that the Bodhisattva has committed to is not a distant, inert possibility. It is an active force in the present, pulling the Bodhisattva toward it, organizing the chaos of present experience around the attractor of future awakening. The Zen tradition captures this with a paradox that echoes the block universe. You are already enlightened. The future state of awakening is not something you will achieve through practice. It is something you already are but have not yet recognized. Practice does not create enlightenment. Practice reveals enlightenment that was always present, or, in the language of retrocausality, practice allows the future state of awakening to exert its backward-reaching influence on the present mind, dissolving the obstructions that prevent the recognition of what was always already the case. The Zen master Shunryu Suzuki captured this with his famous statement, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." The beginner's mind is the mind that is open to the pull of the future, the mind that has not yet collapsed the superposition of possibilities into a single, fixed trajectory. The expert's mind is the mind that has already determined its path and is no longer responsive to the backward-reaching influence of alternative futures. Beginner's mind is the state of maximum sensitivity to retrocausal influence, the state in which the pull of the future is most strongly felt and most faithfully followed. The Soto Zen tradition's emphasis on shikantaza, just sitting, meditation without goal, without technique, without any forward-directed effort makes sense in this framework. If the future is already pulling you toward awakening, then the most effective practice is not to push harder toward the goal, but to stop pushing and allow the pull to operate. Shikantaza is the surrender of forward-only causation, the release of the assumption that only your past efforts determine your future state. By sitting without agenda, you allow the future to reach you. By stopping the forward push, you feel the backward pull. The Tibetan Buddhist concept of tulku, a consciously reincarnated lama who chooses their rebirth in order to continue their work of compassion, is a direct expression of the future influencing the past. The tulku's future purpose, the continuation of their dharma work, determines their present birth. The future mission selects the present incarnation. The destination chooses the journey. In the retrocausal framework, this is not a supernatural miracle. It is the operation of the future boundary condition on the present quantum state of consciousness, the backward propagating influence that Aharonov's formalism describes in the language of physics. In Islam, the concept of fitra, the innate human nature, the original disposition toward truth and goodness with which every person is born, acquires new meaning in the retrocausal context. Fitra is usually understood as a gift from the past, a quality installed at creation and gradually obscured by conditioning, culture, and choice. But it can also be understood as a pull from the future, a memory of the state toward which consciousness is being drawn, a foretaste of the reunion with the divine that is the ultimate destination of every soul. The Quran describes this reunion. Inna lillahi wa inna ilahi raji'un. We belong to God, and to God we shall return. The return is not merely a future event. It is a present force, the backward propagating influence of the Omega on the Alpha, the future pulling every soul toward the divine source from which it emerged. The Sufi concept of Jadbi, divine attraction, the pull of God on the soul, makes this explicit. The Sufi mystic does not merely walk toward God through their own effort. God pulls the mystic toward himself through a force that operates from the future, from the state of union that is the mystic's ultimate destiny. Jadbi is retrocausality experienced from the inside, the subjective feeling of being drawn toward a future that already exists, and that is already exerting its gravitational pull on the present. In Hinduism, the concept of sankalpa, a deeply held intention or vow that organizes the trajectory of a life, functions as a personal attractor. When you make a sankalpa with full sincerity and full attention, you are, in the attractor framework, setting a future boundary condition that begins immediately to shape the present. The sankalpa does not merely express a wish. It creates a gravitational field, an attractor that pulls your present actions, your present choices, and your present experience toward the future state that the sankalpa describes. The power of the sankalpa is not the power of willpower pushing from the present. It is the power of the future pulling from ahead. The convergence is now becoming unmistakable. The physics tells us that the future influences the present through retrocausal mechanisms built into the fundamental laws of quantum mechanics. The presentiment experiments tell us that human physiology responds to future events before they occur. The attractor framework tells us that complex systems are guided by future states that organize present behavior. And the contemplative traditions tell us that destiny, divine attraction, and the pull of the future are not metaphors, but lived experiences, experiences of a real causal influence that operates backward in time, drawing consciousness toward the state that it is ultimately destined to reach. The Christian mystic Julian of Norwich, writing in the 14th century, reported a vision in which Christ told her, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." This is not naive optimism. It is the experiential report of someone who has perceived the future attractor, the omega point, the state of final reconciliation toward which all of creation is being drawn. Julian's certainty that all shall be well is not based on an analysis of present conditions, which in 14th century England were catastrophic. It is based on a direct perception of the future state, a perception made possible in the retrocausal framework by the backward propagating influence of the future on the contemplative mind that has been trained to receive it. The Quran makes a similar promise. Verily, with hardship comes ease. This is not merely a statement about the sequence of events. It is a statement about the structure of time, about the relationship between the present moment of difficulty and the future moment of resolution that is already, from the divine perspective, a completed reality. The ease does not merely follow the hardship, it is present within the hardship, as the future is present within the present, as the oak is present within the acorn, as the omega point is present within every moment of the journey toward it. In the next stage of this investigation, we will ask the most personal version of the question: is your future self already influencing your present choices? Is the person you are becoming already reaching backward through time and shaping the person you are now? And if so, what does this mean for the concepts of free will, destiny, and the purpose of human life? The pull is real. The physics confirms it. The experiments detect it. The traditions describe it. And the feeling that you have sometimes had, the feeling that your life is moving towards something, that there is a destination you cannot see but can sense, that something ahead of you is calling you forward, may be the most accurate perception you have ever had. It may be the subjective experience of the future's backward-reaching hand, guiding you toward the person you already are in the completed block of space-time, the person who is waiting, at the end of the story, to welcome you home. We have now established the physics. The fundamental laws are time-symmetric. Retrocausality is built into quantum mechanics, and present observations retroactively determine past quantum states. We have established the evidence. Presentiment studies show human physiology responding to future events before they occur, and attractor dynamics show complex systems being guided by future states. Now we must ask the most personal and the most unsettling question in this investigation. Is your future self real? Do they already exist? And are they, right now, reaching backward through time and influencing the person you are in this moment? The answer depends on how you understand the relationship between consciousness and time, and the deepest frameworks in both physics and the contemplative traditions suggest an answer that will fundamentally change how you think about who you are. Let us begin with the block universe, which we explored in our investigation of time, but which now acquires a new and more personal significance. In the block universe of general relativity, past, present, and future are equally real. They coexist as features of a four-dimensional space-time block, like the pages of a book that all exist simultaneously even though the reader experiences them one at a time. Your birth is a real event in the space-time block. Your death is a real event in the space-time block. And every moment between them, every choice, every breath, every thought is a real, permanent, simultaneously existing feature of the four-dimensional structure of reality. The feeling that the past has vanished and the future does not yet exist is not a feature of physics. It is a feature of consciousness, a limitation of the way your brain constructs the experience of time from the timeless structure of the block. If the block universe is correct, then your future self is not a hypothetical entity that may or may not come into existence depending on your choices. Your future self already exists. They are as real as your present self. They are a feature of the space-time block, located at a later temporal coordinate, but no less actual for being temporally distant. The person you will be at the end of your life is, right now, as you read these words, a real, existing entity in the four-dimensional structure of reality. You have not yet experienced being them, but they exist. They have always existed, and they will always exist, as a permanent feature of the space-time block. This is not an abstraction. This is a statement about you, personally, right now. The person you were at age 5 is not gone. They exist at the temporal coordinate of your 5th birthday as a permanent feature of the space-time block. The person you will be at age 80, if your world line extends that far, is not a hypothetical possibility. They exist at the temporal coordinate of your 80th birthday with the same ontological reality as the person who is reading these words. The difference between your present self and your future self is not a difference between real and not yet real. It is a difference between experienced and not yet experienced. Your future self is real. You just have not caught up to them yet. The philosopher of physics Craig Callender has argued that the block universe makes the concept of personal identity far more complex than ordinary intuition suggests. You are not a single entity moving through time. You are an extended object, a world line in the space-time block, with temporal extension as well as spatial extension. Just as your body extends through space, your head is here, your feet are there, your existence extends through time. Your birth is here, your death is there. You are not a point, you are a line, and the line is complete, from beginning to end, as a permanent feature of the block. If you are an extended object in the space-time block, then the relationship between your present self and your future self is not the relationship between a real entity and a potential entity. It is the relationship between two parts of the same entity, two temporal segments of the same world line, both equally real, both equally present in the block. Your future self is not someone you might become. They are someone you already are, at a different temporal coordinate. And if the two-state vector formalism is correct, the influence between these two segments flows in both directions. Now combine this with the two-state vector formalism. Aharonov showed that quantum systems are determined by both their past and their future boundary conditions. The present state is shaped by the pre-selection from the past and the post-selection from the future. If your brain is a quantum system, and the Penrose-Hameroff model of consciousness proposes that it is, with quantum processes in microtubules playing a constitutive role in conscious experience, then your present state of consciousness is determined not only by your past experiences, your memories, your conditioning, and the neural patterns that your history has established. It is also determined by your future state, by the person you will become, the experiences you will have, the consciousness you will possess at a later point in the space-time block. Your future self is not merely a passive entity waiting at a future temporal coordinate. Your future self is an active influence on your present experience, reaching backward through the retrocausal mechanism that quantum mechanics describes and shaping your present consciousness through the post-selection that Aharonov's formalism identifies as a genuine physical process. This is a staggering claim, but it follows directly from the established physics. If the block universe is correct, your future self exists. If the two-state vector formalism is correct, the future influences the present. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then the future influence on the present includes influence on conscious experience. The conclusion is inescapable. Your future self is influencing your present consciousness, not metaphorically, not inspirationally, physically, through the same retrocausal mechanism that the delayed choice experiments confirm and that Aharonov's weak value experiments have measured in the laboratory. What does this influence feel like from the inside? Consider the experience of intuition. You walk into a room and feel, immediately and without any conscious analysis, that something is wrong. You meet a person and feel, before any evidence has been gathered, that they are trustworthy or dangerous. You face a decision and feel, despite the rational arguments pointing in one direction, a pull toward the other direction that you cannot explain but that turns out, in retrospect, to have been correct. These experiences are usually attributed to unconscious pattern recognition to the brain's rapid automatic processing of information that the conscious mind has not yet analyzed. And in many cases, this explanation is correct. The brain is an extraordinary pattern recognition machine, and it often arrives at correct conclusions long before the conscious mind catches up. But the retrocausal framework adds another possibility. Some of your intuitions may not be based on patterns from the past. They may be based on information from the future. The future outcome of the decision, the future state that will result from your choice, may be reaching backward and influencing your present feeling about the choice. The pull you feel is not merely the brain's unconscious analysis of past data. It may be the future's backward-reaching influence on the present, the post-selection, shaping the pre-selection, guiding the present toward the future that is already, in the block universe, a completed reality. The psychologist Carl Jung described a related phenomenon that he called synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by ordinary causation. You think of a friend you have not seen in years, and they call you that afternoon. You dream of a specific symbol, and the next day you encounter that symbol in an unexpected context. You make a decision, and a series of events unfolds that seems too perfectly orchestrated to be accidental. Jung argued that these experiences are not random coincidences. They are expressions of an underlying order that connects events across time and space through meaning rather than through mechanical causation. In the retrocausal framework, synchronicity acquires a physical mechanism. The meaningful coincidence is not caused by the past pushing events into an unlikely configuration. It is caused by the future pulling events into a meaningful configuration. The phone call from the friend you were thinking about is not caused by your thought. It is caused by the future state in which you and your friend are in contact, a future state that exists in the block universe and that reaches backward and shapes both your thought about the friend and the friend's decision to call. The synchronicity is the experiential surface of a retrocausal process, the way it feels from the inside when the future's backward-reaching influence organizes present events into meaningful patterns. Jung himself noted the connection between synchronicity and quantum mechanics. He corresponded extensively with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli, and together they explored the possibility that the acausal connecting principle that underlies synchronicity might be related to the acausal correlations that quantum entanglement produces. The Price-Wharton retrocausal framework provides the specific mechanism that Jung and Pauli were looking for. The future influences the present through the time-symmetric laws of quantum mechanics, creating meaningful correlations between events that are not connected by any forward-only causal chain. The presentiment experiments support this interpretation. If the body can respond physiologically to a future event 2 to 5 seconds before the event occurs, then the nervous system has access to information about the future. If the nervous system has access to information about the future, then the subjective experiences generated by the nervous system, including intuitions, gut feelings, and the inexplicable sense that you should or should not do something, may include information from the future. Your intuition may be, in part, a presentiment, a presentiment, a feeling that precedes the event that justifies it, a perception of a future that has not yet occurred in your experience, but that already exists in the space-time block, and that is already influencing your present through the retrocausal dynamics of quantum mechanics. The physicist Henry Stapp's framework, which we encountered in our investigations of the evil eye and of dreams, adds another dimension. Stapp argues that conscious choices are quantum events, moments at which consciousness selects a specific outcome from among the quantum possibilities that the brain's superposition state contains. Each conscious choice collapses the superposition and creates a definite reality, and the quantum Zeno effect, the mechanism by which sustained, focused attention prevents a quantum state from evolving, is what allows consciousness to stabilize one outcome and prevent the brain from drifting into alternative possibilities. Now apply Stapp's framework to the retrocausal context. If conscious choices are quantum events, and if quantum events are influenced by both past and future boundary conditions, then your conscious choices are influenced by your future self. Not determined by them, the choice is still yours, in the present, made with the freedom that quantum indeterminacy provides, but influenced by them, guided by them, shaped by the backward-reaching pull of the future consciousness that you will become. Your free will is not eliminated, it is enriched. You do not choose in a vacuum, based only on the data that the past has provided. You choose in a field of temporal influence that includes the pull of your own future, the attraction of the person you are destined to become, the gravitational force of the attractor that lies ahead. This framework resolves a paradox that has troubled philosophers of mind for decades, the paradox of rational deliberation. When you deliberate about a decision, you act as if the future is open, as if your choice will determine which possible future becomes actual. But if the future already exists in the block universe, then your choice does not determine the future. The future is already there. So why does deliberation feel meaningful? Why does it feel like your choice matters? The retrocausal framework answers, your choice matters, because it is the mechanism through which the future influences the present. You are not choosing which future to create. You are discovering which future is already exerting its pull on you. The deliberation is real, the choice is genuine, but the choice is not a one-way process of creating the future from the present. It is a bidirectional process in which the future's pull and the past's push meet in the present moment of decision, and the conscious self navigates between them. This is precisely the experience that contemplative practitioners describe. The meditator who sits in stillness is not inactive. They are listening for the pull of the future, the quiet attraction of the state they are being drawn toward. The quieter the mind, the more clearly the pull is felt. The more the noise of ego, craving, and aversion is reduced, the more the signal from the future comes through. Meditation, in this framework, is not a technique for creating a better future. It is a technique for hearing the future that is already calling. Wheeler's participatory universe takes this one step further, creating a temporal loop that is perhaps the most remarkable structure in all of physics. Wheeler proposed that the universe could not have come into definite existence at the Big Bang without observers to collapse the quantum superposition. But observers did not exist at the Big Bang. They evolved billions of years later. So the observers that collapse the Big Bang superposition are located in the future, and their observations reach backward through time to create the definite past that produced the conditions for their own existence. The universe created observers. The observers created the universe. The loop is closed. Neither the universe nor the observers are primary. Both are aspects of a self-consistent temporal loop in which the past creates the future and the future creates the past. Wheeler illustrated this with his famous self-excited circuit diagram, a U-shaped figure in which the universe begins as a quantum superposition at one end, evolves through time, produces conscious observers at the other end, and the observers' observations reach backward to the beginning and collapse the superposition that started the process. The universe is a self-creating, self-observing, a self-sustaining loop in which time is not a one-way flow from past to future, but a circular process in which every point on the loop is simultaneously cause and effect. The self-excited circuit is not just a diagram. It is, Wheeler argued, the deepest truth about the relationship between consciousness and the cosmos. The universe is not a machine that runs according to pre-existing laws, producing consciousness as an accidental byproduct. The universe is a self-creating process in which consciousness and physical reality are mutually constitutive, each one creating the other in a temporal loop that has no beginning and no end, no cause and no effect, only the seamless, self-sustaining, self-referential process of reality knowing itself into existence. The mathematician Douglas Hofstadter described a similar structure in his concept of the strange loop, a self-referential system that creates itself through its own self-reference. The way consciousness creates itself by being aware of being aware. The temporal loop of the participatory universe is the cosmological version of Hofstadter's strange loop. The universe is aware of itself through conscious beings, and conscious beings exist because the universe's self-awareness reached backward and created the conditions for their existence. The loop is not a paradox. It is the fundamental structure of a reality in which consciousness and physics are not separate domains but aspects of a single self-creating, self-knowing process. If Wheeler is right, then you, your consciousness, your observations, your choices are part of the mechanism by which the universe creates itself. Your present observations are reaching backward and creating the past that produced you. Your future observations will reach backward and create the present that is producing your future self. And your future self's observations are reaching backward right now and shaping the present consciousness that is reading these words. The temporal loop is not a cosmic abstraction. It is the structure of your personal reality. You are creating the past that created you, and your future self is creating the present that is creating them. This is where the contemplative traditions achieve their deepest convergence with the physics. In Christianity, the concept of calling vocation, the sense that your life has a specific purpose that you are being drawn toward, is one of the most ancient and most persistent themes in the tradition. The prophet Jeremiah records God saying, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." This is usually read as a statement about divine foreknowledge. But in the retrocausal framework, it is a statement about the temporal structure of identity. Your purpose was not assigned at birth and then gradually discovered through life experience. Your purpose exists at the future end of the space-time block, and it reaches backward through time and shapes the conditions of your birth, the circumstances of your life, and the choices that lead you toward it. God did not merely know you before you were born. The future you, the completed, fulfilled, purpose-realized version of you that exists at the omega end of your personal timeline, was already influencing the conditions that produced the present you. The Apostle Paul describes this temporal structure with remarkable precision in his letter to the Romans. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Notice the tense. He also glorified. Not will glorify. Glorified past tense. Paul is writing as if the future glorification has already occurred. In the block universe, it has. The glorified version of the person already exists at the future end of the timeline. And the calling, the justification, the transformation that leads from the present to the glorified future is not merely a forward-moving process driven by past causes. It is a backward-reaching attraction exerted by the glorified future on the present self. The future pulling the present toward the state that the future already contains. Augustine of Hippo described his own conversion in terms that directly resonate with the retrocausal framework. In the Confessions, Augustine writes of the years of restlessness, searching, and dissatisfaction that preceded his conversion years, in which he felt drawn towards something he could not name, pulled by a force he could not identify, guided by a purpose he could not articulate. Looking back from the vantage point of his converted life, Augustine recognized this pull as the action of divine grace, the future state of faith, reaching backward through time and shaping the present experience of the seeker. "You have made us for yourself, O Lord," Augustine wrote, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. The restlessness is not aimless. It is directed by the pull of the future state of rest that is the heart's ultimate destination. The restlessness is retrocausality, experienced as spiritual longing. Augustine's concept of divine grace itself can be understood retrocausally. Grace is traditionally described as God's unmerited gift, a gift that comes from outside the human person and enables them to do what they could not do on their own. In the retrocausal framework, grace is the backward-reaching influence of the sanctified future on the struggling present, the pull of the completed, glorified self on the incomplete, suffering self that has not yet arrived at the destination. Grace does not come from outside, it comes from ahead. It is your own future, reaching back to help your present. The Orthodox Christian concept of theosis deification, the progressive transformation of the human person into the likeness of God, acquires extraordinary depth in this framework. Theosis is not merely a forward-moving process of spiritual development. It is a response to the backward-reaching pull of the deified state that already exists at the omega end of the person's spiritual timeline. The saints are not merely people who worked hard at spiritual practice. They are people who were drawn forward by the sanctified future that was already, in the block universe, their completed reality. The pull of holiness was stronger in them not because they were morally superior at the starting point, but because their future state was closer, more vivid, more gravitationally powerful in its backward-reaching influence on their present consciousness. The Desert Father Abba Moses expressed this with a simplicity that conceals its depth. Go, sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything. The instruction is not to study, not to strive, not to push forward toward enlightenment through effort. It is to sit, to be still, to be present, to allow the pull of the future to reach you in the silence. The cell will teach you because the future, the state of wisdom and wholeness that exists at the omega end of the contemplative path, is already present in the cell, already reaching backward, already teaching. You do not need to go anywhere. The destination is already coming to you. In Buddhism, the concept of Buddha nature provides the most precise parallel. Buddha nature is the inherent capacity for awakening that exists in every sentient being. It is not something you develop or create through practice. It is something that is already present, already fully formed, already perfect, already complete, and that practice merely uncovers by removing the obstructions that prevent it from being recognized. In the retrocausal framework, Buddha nature is the future state of awakening, reaching backward through time and influencing the present consciousness of every being that will eventually awaken. It is already present because it already exists at the future end of the temporal trajectory, as a real, completed feature of the space-time block. And the practice that reveals it is not a forward-moving process of accumulation, but a backward-receiving process of allowing the future to influence the present. You do not build your way to enlightenment. Enlightenment builds its way to you reaching backward from the future, dissolving the obstructions, clarifying the consciousness, until the present mind recognizes what the future mind already knows. The 13th century Zen master Dogen expressed this with characteristic paradox. If practice and realization are one, then enlightenment is practice. If enlightenment is practice, then a beginner's practice is the whole of original enlightenment. The beginner's first moment of practice is already the completed enlightenment, because the completed enlightenment already exists in the space-time block and is already reaching backward to the beginner's present moment. The beginning and the end are not separated by a temporal gap that must be crossed through effort. They are connected by the retrocausal influence that makes the end present in the beginning. Every moment of practice is already the whole of awakening, seen from the temporal perspective of a consciousness that has not yet arrived at the coordinate where the awakening becomes fully visible. The Zen koan, What was your original face before your parents were born takes on a new meaning in this context. Your original face is not merely a metaphor for your essential nature. It is a reference to your existence in the space-time block prior to your temporal coordinate of birth. In the block universe, you exist at every temporal coordinate of your world line, including coordinates that, from your present perspective, are in the future. Your original face is your timeless face, the face that exists at every point of the block, including the omega point where all the temporal influences converge, and the complete picture of who you are becomes visible. In Islam, the concept of the preserved tablet Allahu al-Mahfuz acquires new depth. The preserved tablet, on which all of creation is inscribed, is not merely a divine record of what has been decreed. It is the block universe itself, the complete, four-dimensional space-time structure in which every event, every choice, every moment of every life is permanently and simultaneously inscribed. The inscription is not a record of what has happened. It is the reality of what exists timelessly, permanently, and in its entirety. Your life is inscribed on the preserved tablet not because God has written a script that you must follow, but because your life, in its entirety, from birth to death and beyond, already exists as a real, completed feature of the space-time block that the tablet describes. The paradox of free will and predestination, which has occupied Islamic theology for 14 centuries, dissolves in the retrocausal framework. You have free will because your choices are genuinely yours, made in the present moment with the quantum indeterminacy that prevents any past state from fully determining the future. And your destiny is written because the choices you freely make are, from the perspective of the completed block, already part of the finished structure. The writing and the choosing are not in conflict. They are two descriptions of the same reality. The reality of a space-time block in which every event is both freely chosen in the present and permanently inscribed in the eternal. The human experience of choosing is the inside view of the block. The divine knowledge of the inscription is the outside view. Both are true, both are real, and neither eliminates the other. In Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita presents the same paradox and the same resolution with extraordinary dramatic power. Arjuna stands on the battlefield, paralyzed by the choice before him. He does not want to fight. The people he must kill are his own relatives, his teachers, his friends. Krishna reveals to Arjuna the Vishvarupa, the cosmic form, the divine vision of the entire universe in its totality. And in this vision, Arjuna sees that the warriors are already dead. The battle has already been fought. The outcome has already been determined. These warriors are already slain by me, Krishna says. You are merely the instrument. This is not fatalism. It is the block universe. Krishna is showing Arjuna the space-time block, the completed structure in which every event already exists. The warriors are already dead because, from the perspective of the block, the battle has already occurred. But Arjuna must still fight, because the fighting is part of the block too. The free choice and the predetermined outcome are not in conflict. They are two aspects of the same four-dimensional reality, seen from two different perspectives, the human perspective of temporal flow and the divine perspective of eternal completion. The experience Arjuna has when he sees the Vishvarupa is the experience of perceiving the block universe directly, of stepping outside the illusion of temporal flow and seeing the entire space-time block in a single, timeless vision. The terror and awe that Arjuna feels is the appropriate emotional response to the recognition that the future is already real, that the past is still present, and that the distinction between them is a feature of human perception, not of divine reality. Every contemplative tradition describes moments of this perception, moments in which the practitioner briefly transcends the ordinary experience of temporal flow and perceives the timeless structure of the block. These moments are called satori in Zen, fana in Sufism, theoria in Christianity, samadhi in Hinduism. They are moments in which the retrocausal structure of reality becomes experientially obvious, moments in which the future's influence on the present is not merely theoretically understood, but directly perceived. The fact that every tradition describes these moments independently in different cultures, different centuries, different theological frameworks is powerful evidence that they are describing a real feature of reality rather than a cultural artifact. The block universe is real, the retrocausal influence is real, and the contemplative perception of timelessness is the subjective experience of encountering this reality directly, without the mediating filter of the brain's time-constructing machinery. The convergence across these traditions is now complete. Christianity describes a calling that reaches backward from the glorified future. Buddhism describes a Buddha nature that is already present, because it already exists at the omega end of the path. Islam describes a preserved tablet on which the entire timeline is simultaneously inscribed. Hinduism describes a cosmic vision in which past, present, and future coexist in a single, completed divine form. And the physics describes a block universe in which all of time exists simultaneously, with retrocausal influences flowing from the future to the present, as naturally as causal influences flow from the past to the present. In the final stage of this investigation, we will bring all of this together into a single picture. We will ask what it means for your daily life if your future self is already influencing your present choices. We will explore the practical implications of the retrocausal framework for how you make decisions, how you understand your intuitions, and how you relate to the persistent human feeling that your life has a direction and a purpose. And we will ask the question that this entire investigation has been building toward. If the future is already pulling you home, what does it mean to let yourself be pulled? Your future self exists. The physics says so. The traditions confirm it. And the quiet pull you sometimes feel, the pull towards something you cannot name but cannot ignore, may be the most important signal you have ever received. It is yourself calling from the end of the story, telling you that the story has a destination, that the destination is real, and that you are already on your way. We have now traced the full arc of this investigation. We began in the laboratory, where the delayed choice experiments demonstrated that present observations retroactively determine past quantum states across billions of years. We followed the trail through the two-state vector formalism, which showed that every quantum system is determined by both its past and its future boundary conditions. We examined the presentiment studies, which showed that human physiology responds to future events before they occur. We explored the attractor framework, which showed that complex systems are guided by future states that organize present behavior. And we listened to the contemplative traditions, which have been describing the pull of the future for millennia in the language of providence, karma, calling, destiny, and the backward-reaching grace of a future that is already complete. Now we must bring all of this together and ask the question that matters most. What does this mean for how you live? Let us begin with a statement of what the evidence supports, stated as precisely and as honestly as we can. Statement 1. The fundamental laws of physics are time-symmetric. They do not distinguish between forward and backward in time. Retrocausality is not a violation of physics. It is a feature of physics. The prejudice that causes must always precede effects is a projection of human experience onto the fundamental laws, which know nothing of this prejudice. Statement 2. The block universe is the picture of reality that general relativity provides. Past, present, and future coexist as permanent features of a four-dimensional space-time structure. The feeling that the past has vanished and the future does not yet exist is a feature of consciousness, not of reality. Your future self exists, right now, as a real entity at a future temporal coordinate of the space-time block. Statement 3. The two-state vector formalism provides mathematical evidence that quantum systems are influenced by their future boundary conditions. This has been confirmed by weak value experiments, the quantum Cheshire cat effect, and the delayed choice experiments. The future reaches backward and shapes the present through a mechanism that is built into the fundamental equations of quantum mechanics. Statement 4. The presentiment experiments provide empirical evidence that human physiology responds to future events before they occur. The meta-analytic evidence is statistically significant at levels that exceed almost any finding in conventional psychology. The effect is small but robust, and it is consistent with the retrocausal mechanism that the physics describes. Statement 5. The contemplative traditions, across every major civilization and every major religious framework, describe the experience of being guided by the future, the pull of destiny, the attraction of the divine, the backward-reaching grace of a completed state that draws the present toward it. These descriptions are structurally identical to the retrocausal framework that physics provides, despite arising independently in cultures that had no contact with each other and no knowledge of quantum mechanics. These are the pillars of the argument. None of them is beyond dispute. The block universe is one interpretation of general relativity, not the only one. The two-state vector formalism is one interpretation of quantum mechanics, not the consensus. The presentiment evidence is contested, and the contemplative traditions are not scientific evidence. But the convergence across all 5 pillars, the consistency of the picture they collectively paint, is remarkable, and it points toward a possibility that deserves serious consideration. The future is real, the future influences the present, and the direction of your life is shaped not only by where you have been, but by where you are going. These 5 pillars do not stand alone. They are supported by every investigation we have conducted in this series. In our investigation of time, we established that the block universe is the picture of reality that physics provides, and that the experience of temporal flow is a construction of the brain. In our investigation of the first observer, we established that consciousness participates in the creation of physical reality through the quantum measurement process, and Wheeler's self-excited circuit showed us that this participation operates as a temporal loop in which the future creates the past that creates the future. In our investigation of the evil eye, we established that the quality of observation has physical consequences, and the retrocausal framework tells us that these consequences extend not only forward in time but backward. In our investigation of dreams, we established that the sleeping brain may have access to information from dimensions of reality that waking consciousness normally excludes, and the retrocausal framework identifies one of those dimensions as the future. And in our investigation of the universe's moral structure, we established that the quality of your actions becomes a permanent feature of reality through information conservation, and the retrocausal framework tells us that this permanence extends in both temporal directions, with the future quality of your consciousness reaching backward and shaping the present quality of your experience. The retrocausal framework is not a new idea added to the existing picture. It is the thread that connects the entire picture into a single, coherent tapestry. Now, let us explore what this means in practice. If the retrocausal framework is correct, then the persistent human feeling that life has a direction, that there is a purpose you are meant to fulfill, a path you are meant to follow, a destination you are meant to reach, is not an illusion generated by the brain's narrative machinery. It is a perception, not a perfect perception, not an infallible perception, but a genuine perception of a genuine feature of reality, the backward-reaching influence of your own future on your present experience. This does not mean that every intuition is correct, that every gut feeling is prophetic, or that you should abandon rational analysis in favor of following your instincts. The retrocausal signal is subtle. It is mixed with noise, the noise of ego, of fear, of desire, of conditioning, of all the forward-only causal factors that also shape your present experience. Distinguishing the signal from the noise is difficult, and it is exactly the skill that the contemplative traditions have been training for millennia. The Buddhist practice of sati mindfulness is, in the retrocausal framework, a practice of distinguishing the retrocausal signal from the forward causal noise. When you sit in meditation and observe your mind without judgment, you are learning to distinguish between the thoughts that arise from past conditioning, from memory, from habit, from reactive patterns established by experience, and the subtler impulses that arise from a source that the past cannot explain, the quiet pull towards something you cannot name, the sense that a particular direction is right even when the rational analysis says otherwise, the feeling that you are being drawn, not pushed. These may be the retrocausal signal, the influence of the future, filtered through the noisy, imperfect medium of the present mind. The Buddhist teacher Ajahn Chah described this discernment with an image of extraordinary simplicity. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. What is being let go? In the retrocausal framework, it is the grip of forward-only causation, the compulsive reliance on past data, past patterns, and past conditioning as the sole basis for present decisions. Each stage of letting go opens a wider channel for the retrocausal signal. A little letting go allows a little of the future's influence through. A lot of letting go allows a lot, and complete letting go, the state the Buddhist tradition calls surrender, and which is not passivity, but the most radical form of openness, allows the full retrocausal signal to reach the present mind without obstruction. The peace that Ajahn Chah describes is not merely the absence of agitation, it is the presence of alignment, the felt sense of moving in harmony with the temporal current that flows from the future to the present, rather than fighting against it with the ego's insistence on controlling what happens next. Peace is what it feels like when the forward causal pushing stops and the retrocausal pulling is allowed to guide. The Christian practice of discernment, the art of distinguishing between spiritual impulses, serves the same function. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, developed the most sophisticated system of discernment in the Christian tradition. Ignatius distinguished between consolation, the inner movement toward peace, clarity, and alignment with one's deepest purpose, and desolation, the inner movement toward anxiety, confusion, and disconnection from purpose. Consolation, in Ignatian discernment, is the sign that you are moving in the right direction. Desolation is the sign that you have strayed. In the retrocausal framework, consolation is the subjective experience of alignment with the future attractor, the feeling that your present trajectory is converging with the future state toward which you are being drawn. Desolation is the experience of misalignment, the feeling that your present trajectory is diverging from the future attractor, moving away from the destination rather than toward it. The Ignatian practice of paying attention to consolation and desolation is, in physical terms, a practice of monitoring the retrocausal signal, of tracking the backward-reaching influence of the future and using it as a compass for present decisions. Ignatius developed a specific method for major life decisions that integrates the forward causal and retrocausal dimensions with remarkable sophistication. The method involves 3 stages. First, you gather all the rational evidence, the forward causal data, from past experience and analysis. Second, you present the decision to God in prayer and attend to the inner movements of consolation and desolation that arise the retrocausal signal from the future. Third, you make the decision and then observe the quality of inner peace or disturbance that follows, the confirmation or disconfirmation that comes from the alignment or misalignment with the future attractor. This 3-stage method is not mystical hand-waving. It is a practical protocol for integrating 2 sources of information that are both genuine, the forward causal data from the past and the retrocausal signal from the future. The rational analysis provides the necessary but insufficient foundation. The contemplative attention provides the additional dimension that reason alone cannot access. And the post-decision observation provides the feedback loop that allows you to calibrate your sensitivity to the retrocausal signal over time. Every contemplative tradition has developed some version of this protocol. The Buddhist practice of sitting with a question in meditation and waiting for clarity to arise. The Islamic practice of istikhara, the prayer for guidance, in which the seeker presents a decision to God before sleep and attends to the dreams, feelings, and circumstances that follow. The Hindu practice of consulting the inner guru, the voice of the Atman, the deeper self that knows what the surface self does not. Each tradition has discovered, through centuries of experimentation with consciousness, that major decisions are best made by combining rational analysis with contemplative receptivity, by attending to both the push of the past and the pull of the future. This reframing transforms the way you think about decisions. In the ordinary framework, a decision is a forward-looking process. You analyze the available options, predict their consequences, and choose the option with the best predicted outcome. The analysis is based entirely on past data, on what you know, what you have experienced, what the evidence suggests. The future is unknown, and the decision is an attempt to navigate the unknown based on the known. In the retrocausal framework, a decision is a bidirectional process. You analyze the past data, but you also attend to the pull of the future. You consider the rational arguments, but you also listen for the signal from the attractor. You weigh the evidence, but you also feel for the consolation or desolation that indicates alignment or misalignment with the future state that is already reaching backward and shaping your present experience. This does not mean that you abandon reason. It means that you supplement reason with a sensitivity to a dimension of information that reason alone cannot access. The retrocausal signal is not rational. It does not arrive as a logical argument with premises and conclusions. It arrives as a feeling, an intuition, a subtle pull, a sense of rightness or wrongness that cannot be articulated, but that is, according to the physics, potentially based on genuine information about the future. The contemplative traditions have all developed practices for cultivating this sensitivity. In Buddhism, the practice progresses from sati through samadhi to prajna, from mindful attention through deep concentration to wisdom. Prajna is not ordinary knowledge. It is direct insight into the nature of reality, the kind of seeing that perceives the deep structure of things, including their temporal structure. A mind that has been trained in sati and samadhi is a mind that is quiet enough to hear the retrocausal signal, focused enough to distinguish it from noise, and wise enough to act on it without distortion. In Christianity, the practice of contemplative prayer as taught by the Desert Fathers, the Hesychast tradition, and the great mystics like John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila cultivates the same sensitivity. John of the Cross described the dark night of the soul as a period in which all forward-looking supports are removed, all consolation, all sense of progress, all rational understanding of where the path is leading, and the soul is left with nothing but naked trust in the pull of a destination it cannot see. The dark night is, in the retrocausal framework, the period in which the forward causal signal drops to zero, and the only guidance available is the retrocausal signal from the future. The soul that survives the dark night emerges with a sensitivity to the future's pull that was not possible when the forward causal signals were still dominant. The dark night is one of the most widely misunderstood concepts in Christian mysticism. It is not depression. It is not spiritual failure. It is not the absence of God. It is the withdrawal of all forward causal supports so that the retrocausal signal can be heard in its purity. When every consolation, every sense of progress, every rational understanding is removed, what remains is the naked pull of the future, the bare, unmediated attraction of the destination, stripped of all the secondary signals that normally accompany it. The dark night is the most direct experience of retrocausality available to human consciousness, the moment when the noise drops to zero and the signal from the future is all that remains. The Buddhist concept of the great doubt in Zen practice is the exact parallel. The practitioner sits with their koan until all conceptual understanding collapses, all forward-looking strategies fail, and the mind is left in a state of absolute not knowing. It is in this state of total surrender of forward causal understanding that Satori sudden awakening occurs. The great doubt is the dark night of Zen, the withdrawal of all forward causal supports that allows the retrocausal breakthrough to occur. Teresa of Avila mapped the interior life with extraordinary precision in her interior castle, describing 7 mansions of progressive spiritual development. In the earliest mansions, the soul is guided primarily by external rules, rational analysis, and moral effort, forward causal guidance based on past learning. In the later mansions, this gives way to an increasingly direct experience of being guided from within, guided by a force that the soul recognizes as divine, but that is, in the retrocausal framework, the backward-reaching influence of the sanctified future that exists at the 7th mansion, reaching backward through the temporal structure of the soul's journey and drawing it forward through the intermediate mansions. The 7th mansion, the spiritual marriage, the permanent union with the divine, is not merely the end point of the journey. It is the attractor that organizes the entire journey. Without the 7th mansion, the earlier mansions make no sense. The path has no direction without a destination. And if the destination already exists in the space-time block, if the 7th mansion is as real as the first, then its influence on the earlier stages of the journey is not metaphorical. It is physical. The 7th mansion is pulling. The first mansion is being pulled. And the journey from one to the other is the experiential surface of a retrocausal process that is as natural and as lawful as the gravitational attraction between 2 masses. In Islam, the Sufi tradition describes this journey with the concept of the maqamat and ahwal, the stations and states of the spiritual path. The stations are permanent acquisitions of spiritual quality, repentance, patience, gratitude, trust, love. The states are transient experiences of divine disclosure, moments of ecstasy, clarity, union, and peace that come and go unpredictably. The stations are reached through effort, the states are given through grace, and the relationship between them is precisely the relationship between the forward causal and the retrocausal. The stations are the result of the past's push, the accumulated effort of spiritual practice. The states are the result of the future's pull, the backward-reaching disclosure of the divine reality that is the journey's destination. The great Sufi master Al-Junaid described the end of the spiritual path as the return to the beginning fana, followed by baqa, annihilation followed by subsistence, the dissolution of the ego self, followed by the reconstitution of the self in God. The path is a circle, not a line. You end where you began. But the you that returns is not the you that departed. The return is a return with knowledge, with awareness, with the direct perception of the temporal structure that was always present, but that the ego's illusion of forward-only time prevented from being seen. The Sufi path is a journey from the illusion of linear time to the perception of circular time, from the experience of being pushed by the past to the experience of being pulled by the future, and the discovery, at the end, that the pushing and the pulling were always the same force, seen from 2 sides of the same temporal circle. In Hinduism, the concept of Leela, divine play, provides the final framework for understanding the relationship between free will and destiny in the retrocausal universe. Leela is the idea that the universe is God's play, a creative expression of divine joy that is not constrained by the serious, purposeful, goal-directed logic of human endeavor. The universe is not a machine grinding toward an endpoint. It is a dance, an improvisation, a creative expression in which every moment is simultaneously free and determined, spontaneous and scripted, novel and eternal. In the retrocausal framework, Lila is the subjective experience of the bidirectional temporal process. The past pushes, the future pulls, and the present is the meeting point where the two forces dance together, creating the ever-new, ever-surprising, ever-unfolding experience that you call your life. The dance is not predetermined in the mechanical sense. It is not a script that you are forced to follow, but it is not random in the meaningless sense either. It is not a series of accidents with no direction and no purpose. It is a dance between the push of history and the pull of destiny, between the momentum of the past and the attraction of the future, between the person you have been and the person you are becoming. The concept of Leela resolves the apparent conflict between free will and destiny with a grace that neither Western philosophy nor Western science has matched. In the Western framework, free will and determinism are opposites. If your future is determined, you are not free, and if you are free, your future is not determined. This is a false dichotomy created by the assumption that causation flows only from past to future. In the retrocausal framework, the dichotomy dissolves. Your future influences your present, but your present choices also create your future. The influence is bidirectional, and neither direction has priority. You are simultaneously free and destined free in the present, destined in the block, and these are not contradictory properties of two different situations. They are complementary descriptions of a single bidirectional temporal process. The Indian philosopher Aurobindo described this process as the involution and evolution of consciousness. Consciousness involutes descends from its divine source into matter, forgetting its origin, losing itself in the density of physical existence. Then consciousness evolves, ascends from matter back toward its divine source, remembering its origin, recovering its true nature. The involution is the past creating the present. The evolution is the future pulling the present, and the human being, standing at the meeting point of involution and evolution, is simultaneously the product of the past's descent and the recipient of the future's ascent. The direction of your life is not determined by the past alone. It is determined by the convergence of two temporal forces, the memory of where you came from and the attraction of where you are going. Your free will is real. Your choices matter. The present moment is genuinely open, and the decision you make right now is genuinely yours. But the openness is not an empty openness. It is a structured openness, structured by the backward-reaching influence of the future state that your choices are converging toward. You are free, but you are free within a field of temporal influence that includes the pull of your own destiny. And the pull is not a constraint on your freedom. It is the source of your freedom's direction, the thing that gives your choices meaning, your life purpose, and your journey a destination. We must, as always, be honest about the limits of what we have established. The retrocausal framework is not proven. The presentiment evidence is contested. The block universe is one interpretation among several, and the contemplative traditions, however consistent and however ancient, are not scientific proof. The possibility that the future influences the present is exactly that, a possibility. It is supported by converging evidence from physics, neuroscience, and the contemplative traditions, but it is not confirmed beyond doubt. What is confirmed is this: the ordinary assumption that causation flows only from past to future is not a feature of the fundamental laws of physics. It is a feature of our perception. The laws permit retrocausality. The experiments detect it at the quantum level. The presentiment studies suggest it at the biological level. and the contemplative traditions describe it at the experiential level. The convergence may be coincidental, but it may also be pointing toward a truth about the nature of time, consciousness, and human destiny that science is only beginning to articulate and that the traditions have been living for millennia. But even within these limits, the retrocausal framework changes something fundamental about how you understand your own experience. Even as a possibility rather than a certainty, it transforms the feeling of purpose from an evolutionary artifact to a potential perception. It transforms intuition from an unconscious heuristic to a potential channel of information from the future. It transforms the contemplative practices from psychological techniques to potential methods for enhancing retrocausal sensitivity. And it transforms the question of how to live from a purely forward-looking problem, how do I create the best future from the materials of the past, to a bidirectional exploration, how do I align my present with the future that is already pulling me toward it. The shift in perspective is enormous, even if the retrocausal framework turns out to be only partially correct, because it means that you are not alone in time. You are not a solitary consciousness marooned in the present, cut off from the future by the one-way flow of causation. You are connected to your future self through the same temporal bridge that connects entangled particles, that connects the delayed choice measurement to the ancient photon, that connects the presentiment response to the future stimulus. The bridge is real, the connection is physical, and the pull you feel is not an illusion. And there is one more thing that the convergence suggests, one more implication that is perhaps the most important of all. If the future influences the present, and if your future self is already reaching backward and shaping your current experience, then the quality of the future you are moving toward matters enormously, not merely because you will eventually experience that future, but because you are already experiencing it right now, in this present moment, through the retrocausal influence that the future is exerting on your present consciousness. A future of wisdom, compassion, and clarity is reaching backward and producing present experiences of insight, kindness, and peace. A future of bitterness, isolation, and confusion is reaching backward and producing present experiences of resentment, disconnection, and fog. The quality of your present experience is not merely the product of your past, it is also the product of your future. And the choices you make now, the practices you engage in, the attention you cultivate, the quality of consciousness you develop, are not merely building a future, they are selecting a future. And the future you select is already influencing the present in which the selection is being made. The Buddhist concept of karma, which we explored in our investigation of the universe's moral structure, acquires its deepest meaning in this retrocausal context. Karma is not merely the forward-propagating consequence of past actions. It is the bidirectional temporal loop in which past actions create future states, and future states reach backward and shape present experience. Good karma is not merely a deposit in a cosmic savings account that you will withdraw in the future. Good karma is a future state of consciousness that is already reaching backward and enhancing the quality of your present experience. The fruits of good action are not delayed until the future. They are experienced now, through the retrocausal influence of the future they are creating. This explains a phenomenon that every practitioner of the contemplative traditions has observed. The benefits of practice often seem to precede the practice itself. You begin a meditation retreat, and before the deep practice has begun, you already feel a shift, a lightening, a clarifying, a subtle sense of well-being that seems premature, given that the practice has barely started. In the retrocausal framework, this is not premature. It is the future state of deep practice, which already exists in the block universe, reaching backward and producing its effects in the present before the linear sequence of practice has unfolded. The benefits precede the practice because the future precedes the present, or rather, because the future and the present are not separated in the way that ordinary temporal experience suggests. This is the deepest temporal loop in the retrocausal framework. Your present choices create your future, and your future shapes your present choices. The loop is self-reinforcing. Good choices create a good future, and the good future reaches backward and makes further good choices easier. Bad choices create a bad future, and the bad future reaches backward and makes further bad choices more likely. The traditions call this karma, or grace, or divine decree, or the fruits of action. The physics calls it a self-consistent temporal loop, and the practical implication is the same. The most important thing you can do in this present moment is to choose well, because the choice does not merely affect the future. It affects the present, retroactively, through the future it creates. This self-reinforcing loop has a testable prediction. If the retrocausal framework is correct, then individuals who are engaged in contemplative practice, who are actively cultivating the quality of consciousness that the traditions prescribe, should show stronger presentiment effects than individuals who are not. Their sensitivity to the retrocausal signal should be enhanced by the training, and the quality of the future they are moving toward, a future of greater clarity, greater compassion, greater integration, should reach backward more strongly and produce more pronounced physiological and neurological anticipations of future events. This prediction has not been rigorously tested, but there is preliminary evidence consistent with it. The enhanced gamma oscillations in advanced meditators, documented by Lutz and Davidson, suggest a neural state that is more coherent, more integrated, and potentially more sensitive to retrocausal influence. The presentiment effects that Radin and Mossbridge have documented may be the baseline, the retrocausal sensitivity of an untrained mind. The contemplative traditions may be training methods for amplifying this sensitivity to levels that the presentiment experiments have not yet measured. The experiment that needs to happen is a presentiment study comparing advanced contemplative practitioners, long-term meditators, experienced monks, seasoned contemplatives with untrained controls, using the most sensitive physiological and neurological measures available. If the retrocausal framework is correct, the practitioners should show a presentiment effect that is significantly larger than the control group. If they do, it would be the first empirical evidence that contemplative practice enhances the human capacity to receive information from the future. Every contemplative tradition prescribes the same response to this recognition: practice. Cultivate the quality of consciousness that aligns with the highest future you can envision. Sit in meditation and learn to distinguish the retrocausal signal from the forward causal noise. Pray, and discover that the answer was already present before the question was asked. Practice virtue, and notice that the virtue does not merely produce future rewards but transforms the present experience through the backward-reaching influence of the virtuous future it creates. Pay attention, and discover that what you are paying attention to is paying attention to you, that the future you are moving toward is already aware of you, already shaping you, already guiding you toward itself. The physicist John Archibald Wheeler, whose work has been the foundation of this entire investigation, was once asked what he thought the universe was trying to tell us. He paused for a long time, and then he said, "The universe is a self-excited circuit. It is a system that brings itself into being by the observations it makes upon itself." Wheeler's statement is the thesis of this entire series, stated in 12 words. The universe brings itself into being through observation. Observation is an act of consciousness, and consciousness does not operate in one temporal direction only. It operates in both creating the past through present observation, creating the present through future influence, and creating the future through past action. The circuit is not a metaphor. It is the literal structure of a reality in which time is a circle, consciousness is the generator, and your attention is the current that flows through the circuit and sustains the universe's existence. Every investigation in this series has been circling this single truth from a different angle. Time is not what it seems. Death is not what it seems. Observation changes reality. Consciousness connects all things. The universe began with awareness. Reality is a holographic projection. Dreams are windows into the quantum landscape. The universe has a moral structure, and now, the future is reaching backward and guiding you home. These are not separate findings. They are aspects of a single insight, the insight that consciousness is fundamental, that information is constitutive, that observation is creative, and that the temporal structure of reality is not a one-way flow, but a self-sustaining, self-creating loop in which every moment is both cause and effect, both origin and destination, both alpha and omega. You are part of that circuit. Your observations are part of the mechanism by which the universe creates itself. Your present consciousness is shaped by a future that you are also creating. And the loop between present and future, between observation and creation, between the self that chooses and the self that is chosen, is the fundamental structure of a reality that is not a line moving from past to future, but a circle, a dance, a self-knowing, self-creating, a self-sustaining act of awareness that has no beginning and no end, only the eternal present in which the past and the future meet, and in which you, the conscious observer, stand at the intersection of everything that has ever been and everything that will ever be. The future is not empty. Your future self exists, and they are not waiting passively at the end of the story. They are reaching backward, right now, through the retrocausal dynamics of a time-symmetric universe, and whispering into the silence of your present moment the one thing they most want you to know. You are on your way. The destination is real, and you are already closer than you think. The traditions have said it in every language. The physics is beginning to say it in equations. And the quiet voice inside you, the one that has always known, even when you could not explain how, has been saying it all along. Trust the pull. It knows where you are going, because it is already there.